The midday sun streamed through the large windows of Ocean Breeze Grill, a modest yet lively restaurant in Santa Monica, California. It wasn't a high-end spot, but it had a charm of its own, a mix of rustic warmth and modern simplicity that kept the locals coming back. On a warm Thursday afternoon, the place was packed, the air buzzing with conversations, the clinking of cutlery, and the distant hum of ocean waves crashing against the shore. For Megan Carter, a 24-year-old waitress, charm wasn't enough to soften her growing frustration. Her shift had been non-stop chaos from the moment she clocked in. "Megan, table 7 needs extra dressing," called a fellow server. She didn't even glance up as she jotted down an order, her ponytail swaying as she rushed between tables, dodging impatient customers and balancing trays full of plates and drinks. It wasn't just a heavy workload that wore her down. The tips were getting worse, and the attitude of some customers was unbearable. She had already dealt with 3 particularly rude guests in the last hour, each leaving her nothing but few coins or a forced "thank you" before walking out. By the time a man in his late 60s or early 70s strolled in and quietly took a seat at a corner table, Megan was already on edge. He wasn't flashy. Slightly wrinkled flannel shirt, faded jeans, and a well-worn baseball cap resting on the table. His boots looked like they had walked through decades of dust and long roads. Megan gave him a quick once-over, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "Another one who'll probably order coffee and leave me $1. But she couldn't avoid him forever. "Megan, you got table 12? Another co-worker nudged her. Megan sighed, grabbed her notepad, and forced her well-practiced smile as she approached the table. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her tone hovering between politeness and thinly veiled impatience. The man looked up, his sharp blue eyes scanning her face for a moment. There was something about them, something familiar, but Megan couldn't quite place it. "Just a burger," he said calmly, his voice low, gravelly, carrying an unexpected weight. Megan scribbled the order down, tapping her pen against a notepad. "Burger. Got it. Anything else?" "No, ma'am." That word, ma'am, made her roll her eyes as she walked away. "Really?" she muttered under her breath. But as she entered the kitchen, something unsettled her. There was a quiet confidence about the man, an unshakable composure that didn't match the usual customers who either snapped their fingers, demanded refills, or complained about minor inconveniences. Something about him stood out, but Megan shrugged it off. It was just another table, another order, another $1, and she had no idea how wrong she was. If this story has intrigued you so far, hit the like button and comment with your name and city. In the next video, we'll send a special shout-out to those who engage. Let me know if you approve this first chapter before I send the next one. Megan returned to table 12 with the man's burger a few minutes later. The plate landed on the table with a little less care than usual. Not because she was being outright rude, but because she was running on fumes. Her smile was thin and forced as she brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Here you go." She placed a ketchup bottle next to his plate. "Anything else?" The man glanced at the burger, then back at her. "No, this looks just fine." "Thank you." His words were polite, but there was a firmness in his tone that made Megan feel off balance. She lingered for a moment, unsure why. She should have already moved on to another table, but something about him annoyed her. Maybe it was his calmness, the unshakable presence he had. Everyone else in the restaurant was either complaining, snapping their fingers, or rushing around in a frenzy, but not him. Megan leaned slightly against the edge of the table, crossing her arms. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked abruptly. The man looked up at her, chewing thoughtfully before answering. "No, I'm not." He cut his burger in half with deliberate precision, his movements slow and intentional. Megan smirked. "Thought so." The hat gave it away. For the first time, the man smiled, not a full grin, just a faint curve of his lips. Something like that. She expected him to get defensive or irritated, but he didn't. That only frustrated her more. Megan was tired of being polite, tired of holding back her thoughts just to please strangers. She lowered her voice slightly, as if sharing a secret. "You know, most people around here don't show up looking like they just came off a ranch." He didn't react immediately. Instead, he took a measured bite of his burger, chewing slowly, his eyes fixed on something distant. After a moment, he said, "I guess I'm not most people." There was something about the way he said it, something that made Megan feel an odd flicker of embarrassment. She quickly buried it. "Well, enjoy your meal," she said, pushing herself off the table and walking away before he could say anything else. She was sure she had gotten the last word, but as she cleared a nearby table, she felt his gaze on her, not in a creepy way, but in an evaluating way, like he was studying her, like he knew something she didn't. It was unsettling, and she had no idea how much that look would soon change the course of her day, or her life. The lunch rush began to wind down, and the restaurant grew quieter. Megan finally had a chance to catch her breath. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly while keeping an eye on her tables. Her gaze flicked toward table 12. The man was still there, finishing his meal at an unhurried pace. He wasn't like the usual customers, the ones who ate quickly, checked their phones, and rushed out the door. Instead, he seemed to be taking it all in, every detail of the restaurant, every movement of the staff. It was like he was watching something unfold, like he had all the time in the world. Megan sighed, shaking her head. Maybe he was just some old guy reminiscing about the past. "Hey, Megan." She turned as her co-worker, Danny, nudged her. "Isn't it weird how calm that guy is?" Danny nodded toward table 12, like he's observing everything. Megan shrugged. Some people have too much time on their hands. Danny chuckled. Or maybe he's famous. Megan snorted. "Yeah, right." Danny raised an eyebrow. "I mean, he kind of looks familiar, doesn't he?" Megan rolled her eyes. "If he's famous, then I'm the Queen of England." She wasn't in the mood for speculation. Instead, she grabbed the check for table 12 and walked over, determined to keep the interaction brief and professional. "Here's your check." She placed it on the table with a faint smile, already turning to leave. But the man didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he looked up at her, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, Megan felt frozen. There was something in his gaze, a depth, a presence, that made her feel like he could see right through her. Then, he asked a question she wasn't expecting. "Do you enjoy your job?" The words were simple, but the way he said them, it wasn't small talk. It wasn't casual. It was deliberate. Megan hesitated, caught off guard. Her practiced smile faltered for the first time. "It's fine," she said with a shrug. "It's a job, you know?" The man nodded slowly, as if studying her response. Then he said, "A job is what you make of it." His voice was steady, calm, but there was something more behind it. Megan's cheeks flushed slightly. Who was he to comment on her attitude? She crossed her arms, defensive. "Look, I've had a rough shift, okay? Not everyone gets to sit around eating burgers and handing out life advice." To her surprise, the man didn't look offended. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Fair enough." He placed a few bills on the table, then stood up. But sometimes, how you treat people in those moments says more about you than you think. Megan felt anger bubble up in her chest. Was he lecturing her? She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, he tipped his hat slightly and turned toward the door. "I'll leave you with that thought." And just like that, he walked out. Megan stood there, gripping her notepad tightly, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. But what happened next? She never saw coming. Megan stood frozen, gripping her notepad like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She watched as the man walked out the door, his presence still lingering in the air. Her mind replayed his words. "A job is what you make of it." How you treat people in those moments says more about you than you think. Something about the way he spoke unsettled her, like he knew something she didn't. Megan let out a shaky breath and turned back toward the counter. "Whatever," she muttered under her breath, forcing herself to focus on something else. She had other customers to serve, other tables to clean, and Mr. Willis. What a surprise. Megan's body stiffened. "Who?" She turned just in time to see Carol, the restaurant manager, hurrying out from the back office. Her face lit up with excitement as she extended a hand toward the man who had just left. He turned back, shaking her hand with an easy, relaxed smile. "Good to see you, Carol." Megan's stomach dropped. "Willis?" Her heart pounded as she watched Carol gesture toward the restaurant. "We weren't expecting you today. It's always an honor when you stop by." The man, Bruce Willis, nodded. "Just wanted to check in, see how things are running." Megan felt the blood drain from her face. Her entire body went numb as she stared at him, her brain trying to process what she had just heard. Bruce Willis. The man she had just rolled her eyes at, dismissed, and practically insulted, was the owner of the restaurant. She had snapped at him, treated him like he was some random old guy wasting her time. And all along, he had been watching her, evaluating her, testing her without her even knowing it. A slow, sickening realization crept over her. Every word, every look, every small reaction she had thrown at him. He had noticed everything. Megan wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. Her hands felt clammy. Her throat was dry. She swallowed hard as Carol turned toward her, beaming. "Megan, did you get to serve Mr. Willis today?" Megan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Bruce Willis's calm, knowing gaze met hers. For a moment, neither of them said a word. And in that silence, Megan understood something without him having to say it. She hadn't just insulted a customer. She had failed a test she didn't even know she was taking. And somehow, that felt worse than anything else. Megan stood rooted to the spot, her notepad clutched so tightly that her fingers ached. Her mind was spinning, replaying every interaction she had with Bruce Willis just minutes ago. The way she had rolled her eyes at him, the way she had talked down to him, the way she had mocked his appearance. And now, she was standing in his restaurant, with her manager beaming at him like he was a king, while she felt like the biggest fool in the world. She wanted to run to the break room, hide, do anything to avoid the moment when he'd call her out in front of everyone. But he didn't. Instead, Bruce just smiled, giving a small nod to Carol before glancing back at Megan. There was no anger in his expression, no irritation, no smugness, just that same calm, unreadable look. And somehow, that made it worse. Carol, oblivious to Megan's internal breakdown, continued talking enthusiastically. "Mr. Willis is the reason this place is what it is today," she gushed. "He cares about every little detail, how we treat customers, how we run the place, even how the food tastes." Megan's heart sank lower. How we treat customers. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her own embarrassment. Bruce adjusted his cap slightly. "You run a good place, Carol." His words were simple, effortless. And then, after a brief pause, he added, "You can tell a lot about a business by how the staff treats people." His eyes flickered toward Megan just for a second. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even meant to humiliate her, but it hit her like a brick wall. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Carol laughed proudly. "Absolutely. That's why I always tell the team, no matter how busy we are, respect and kindness come first." Megan nearly choked on the irony. Bruce gave Carol one last handshake before turning toward the door. Megan knew this was her last chance to say something, to apologize, to explain, to fix this mistake before it was too late. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She just stood there paralyzed as Bruce Willis, Hollywood legend, business owner, and the man she completely underestimated, walked out the door without another word. And Megan felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. Megan stood rooted to the spot, her notepad clutched so tightly that her fingers ached. Her mind was spinning, replaying every interaction she had with Bruce Willis just minutes ago. The way she had rolled her eyes at him, the way she had talked down to him, the way she had mocked his appearance. And now, she was standing in his restaurant, with her manager beaming at him like he was a king, while she felt like the biggest fool in the world. She wanted to run to the break room, hide, do anything to avoid the moment when he'd call her out in front of everyone. But he didn't. Instead, Bruce just smiled, giving a small nod to Carol before glancing back at Megan. There was no anger in his expression, no irritation, no smugness, just that same calm, unreadable look. And somehow, That made it worse. Carol, oblivious to Megan's internal breakdown, continued talking enthusiastically. Mr. Willis is the reason this place is what it is today, she gushed. He cares about every little detail, how we treat customers, how we run the place, even how the food tastes. Megan's heart sank lower. How we treat customers. She felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her own embarrassment. Bruce adjusted his cap. Slightly. You run a good place, Carol. His words were simple, effortless. And then, after a brief pause, he added, you can tell a lot about a business by how the staff treats people. His eyes flickered toward Megan. Just for a second, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't even meant to humiliate her, but it hit her like a brick wall. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Carol laughed proudly. Absolutely. That's why I always tell the team, no matter how busy we are, respect and kindness come first. Megan nearly choked on the irony. Bruce gave Carol one last handshake before turning toward the door. Megan knew this was her last chance to say something, to apologize, to explain, to fix this mistake before it was too late. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She just stood there, paralyzed, as Bruce Willis, Hollywood legend, business owner, and the man she had completely underestimated, walked out the door without another word. And Megan felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. Our community. If this story has kept you hooked, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. This channel is built with passion, not profit, so your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Hit that notification bell and be part of our growing community. Let me know if you approve before I send the next chapter. Megan sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The events of the day played in a relentless loop inside her head. The calmness in Bruce Willis's voice. The way he watched her without judgment, but with understanding. The words that hit her harder than she wanted to admit. You can tell a lot about a business by how the staff treats people. She had never felt so humiliated, not because he called her out, but because he didn't have to. He let her own actions speak for themselves. She groaned, covering her face with her hands. Why didn't I just say something? Why hadn't she apologized? Why had she just stood there like an idiot while one of the most recognizable men in the world walked away, probably thinking she was just another rude, ungrateful person? The weight of it crushed her chest. It wasn't just about Bruce Willis. It was about how she had been treating people in general. Her job had made her cold, and she had let it happen. She used to be kind, didn't she? She used to care. But over time, the long shifts, rude customers, and empty tips had made her bitter and dismissive. Maybe Bruce had seen that. Maybe that's why he had asked her, do you enjoy your job? Maybe he wasn't just talking about work. Maybe he was asking about her. Megan rolled onto her side, staring at her phone screen. Her fingers hovered over the search bar. Bruce Willis. She hesitated before typing. She had never paid much attention to celebrities, but now she wanted to know more about him. Not just the actor, but the person. The stories that popped up surprised her. He wasn't just a Hollywood legend. He was respected for his kindness, for how he treated people behind the scenes. He gave back to his community. He was known for being humble, despite his success. And that was what set him apart. Megan sighed, setting her phone down. She had spent so much time resenting her job, blaming the customers, feeling like a victim. But maybe, just maybe, she was the one who needed to change. And maybe she wasn't too late to start. The next day, Megan walked into Ocean Breeze Grill with a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She hadn't slept much, and it showed. Her manager, Carol, greeted her with a smile, oblivious to the inner turmoil churning inside her. Good morning, Megan. You ready for another busy day? Megan forced a nod. Yeah, ready as I'll ever be. But inside, she wasn't. She kept glancing toward the door, half expecting Bruce Willis to walk in again. What if he had told Carol about her attitude? What if she was about to be fired? She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not with rent due in 2 weeks and student loans piling up. She spent the first half of her shift walking on eggshells, avoiding eye contact with Carol, and making extra effort with her tables. Smiling more, refilling drinks before being asked, apologizing for minor mistakes. It was the most effort she had put into her job in months. And then, that voice, that unmistakable, gravelly voice. "Well, looks like you're busy today." Megan's heart skipped a beat. She turned sharply to see Bruce Willis, standing near the counter, hands casually resting in his pockets. He was dressed much the same as before, but this time, his presence felt even more commanding. Megan swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "Mr. Willis." "Hi." "Hi." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "I didn't know you'd be back so soon." Bruce tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I like to check in on my places from time to time. Keeps everyone on their toes." Megan's palms were sweaty. She knew exactly what he meant. "Right. Well, everything's running great today," she said quickly, trying to sound confident. Bruce glanced around the restaurant, nodding slowly. "I see that, but you seem a little tense." Megan froze. Of course he noticed. He probably noticed everything. She swallowed hard, opening her mouth to apologize, but Bruce held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "No need to apologize," he said calmly. "I'm not here to make your life harder." She blinked, caught off guard by his response. "You're not?" "No." He shook his head. "But I do think there's a lesson here." Megan braced herself. You never know who you're talking to, or what they might be going through. She felt a lump form in her throat. A little kindness goes a long way. She couldn't argue with that. She didn't want to. For the first time, she saw past a celebrity, past a business owner, and just saw a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to teach. Bruce's voice softened. "Look, I've had bad days too." Megan nodded slowly, her chest feeling tight. "But the way you handle those days," he continued, "says a lot about who you are. And trust me, people notice." His words weren't harsh, but they hit harder than any scolding ever could. He wasn't trying to embarrass her. He was trying to teach her something. Megan's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean it." Bruce gave her a small smile. "You're welcome. Just remember, every interaction is an opportunity. Use it well." And with that, he tipped his cap and walked out, leaving Megan standing there, overwhelmed with a mix of emotions she couldn't even name. For the first time in a long time, she felt something new, the desire to be better. What would you do? Have you ever had a moment that completely changed the way you see things? Comment below and share your thoughts. The next few weeks at Ocean Breeze Grill felt different. Megan couldn't shake Bruce Willis's words from her mind. Every interaction is an opportunity. Use it well. She had spent so long resenting her job, seeing it as nothing more than a dead-end routine. But now she saw it for what it really was, a reflection of her own attitude. She started small. When a frazzled mom with 3 kids accidentally spilled a soda all over the table, Megan didn't sigh or roll her eyes. Instead, she smiled, grabbed a rag, and said, "Don't worry, it happens to the best of us." When an elderly couple asked her to repeat the specials 3 times, she didn't let her frustration show. Instead, she patiently explained them again, and even added her own recommendation. When a customer forgot their wallet, instead of assuming the worst, she offered to hold their order until they could come back. And something unexpected started happening. People noticed. Customers smiled more. Some left bigger tips. Others thanked her sincerely. And for the first time in a long time, Megan felt good about her job. Not because it had changed, but because she had. One evening, just before closing, Carol called her into the office. Megan's stomach twisted. She hadn't been called into the office in a long time. And the last time, it was because she had messed up an order badly. "Come in." "Shut the door," Carol said, sitting at her desk. Megan took a hesitant step inside. Carol folded her hands together. "You've been working here for a while now." Megan nodded. "Yeah, 2 years." Carol's gaze softened. "I've noticed a change in you lately. A good one." Megan blinked. "You have?" Carol nodded. "And so have the customers." She pulled a small stack of common cards from her desk and slid them toward Megan. Megan hesitated before picking one up. Megan was so kind today. Best service I've had in years. She picked up another. She really went above and beyond to help me. Thank you. And another. I've been coming here for a while, and I can tell Megan is putting in more effort lately. It's nice to see. Megan's throat tightened. She hadn't expected any of this. Carol smiled. I don't know what brought on this change, but whatever you're doing, keep it up. Megan swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded slowly. She wanted to say so many things, that she had been blind to her own attitude for too long, that a stranger had taught her a lesson she didn't even know she needed, that she wasn't just working for tips anymore. She was working for herself, for the kind of person she wanted to be. But instead, all she said was, "Thank you. I will." As she walked out of the office, she felt something new stirring inside her, a sense of pride, purpose, change. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally on the right path. The restaurant was unusually quiet for a Friday afternoon. Megan wiped down the counter, feeling lighter than she had in months. Her interactions with customers had shifted, and she could see the difference. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone people remembered, and, in a way, someone they appreciated. Then, the door opened, and the one person she never expected to see again walked in. Bruce Willis. Megan's breath hitched. He looked the same as before, relaxed, confident, effortless. But this time, she wasn't intimidated. This time, she felt ready. Bruce scanned the room, then locked eyes with her. A knowing smile crept onto his lips. Megan wiped her hands on her apron and took a deep breath before walking over. "Welcome back, Mr. Willis." This time, her voice held no hesitation. Bruce chuckled, sitting down at his usual table. "Good to be back, Megan." She took out her notepad. "The usual?" Bruce raised an eyebrow. "You remember?" Megan smirked. "Burger. No onions. Extra ketchup." "Right." Bruce chuckled. "I like a waitress who pays attention." Megan felt a swell of pride. She turned to walk toward the kitchen when, "Megan." She paused, looking back. Bruce leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "How's the job treating you?" Megan exhaled, her smile softening. "You were right." Bruce raised an eyebrow. "About? A job is what you make of it." She felt the words as she said them. Bruce studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can tell you've been making the most of it." Megan didn't need to hear anything else. That was all the validation she needed. She walked away with a newfound confidence, realizing something she never had before. It wasn't about the job. It was about who she chose to be every single day. And that was something she'd carry with her for the rest of her life. Megan locked at the restaurant that night, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sky was painted in shades of deep orange and soft purple, the last traces of sunlight fading beyond the horizon. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh breeze fill her lungs. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't leaving work exhausted and bitter. She was leaving with purpose, with gratitude, with a lesson she would never forget. Bruce Willis hadn't just been a celebrity who owned the restaurant. He had been a mirror, showing her a reflection of herself she had been avoiding for too long. She had spent so much time feeling unappreciated, unseen, frustrated with the world. But the truth was, she had been the one closing herself off. She had let her bad days define her, instead of choosing how to face them. And now she had a choice. To be better, to be kinder, to see the value in every interaction, even the smallest ones. She pulled out her phone, hesitating for a moment before typing into her notes. Every interaction is an opportunity. Use it well. She stared at the words for a long moment before smiling to herself. Then, with a light heart and a clear mind, she slipped her phone back into her pocket and walked home, ready for whatever came next. What's a lesson you'll never forget? Have you ever had a moment that changed your perspective on life? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life lessons that inspire and transform. Thank you for being part of this journey.